let's talk to none other than Fort Worth Star-Telegram's Nick Harris. Nick, the news broke. New head coach. Instant reaction. Let's hear it.
Oh, my God, it's over, guys. That's my instant reaction. Finally, we can get some sleep this weekend. How about that? No, this is something that, yesterday we had heard that the interviews with Brian Schottenheimer on Tuesday and Wednesday were strong, gave the front office a lot to think about in Schottenheimer's case. Granted, I think it maybe took longer than we expected for, that thought process to fully go through. But, there was front office support, in Jerry's face supporting Brian Schottenheimer. And then Jerry comes to the decision here tonight to go ahead and hire Brian Schottenheimer. I think one of the most interesting points, and I know we'll get to a lot of this, so I might be jumping ahead. Sorry, Blake.
You're good.
But I think one of the most interesting parts of this entire thing is that it is a 4-year contract for Brian Schottenheimer.
Oh.
Who else has 4 years left on their deal? Dak Prescott. Who else? CeeDee Lamb. This is definitely lining up to give these core pieces on the offensive side of the ball. You talk about Schottenheimer. You talk about Prescott. You talk about Lamb. These guys are in it together at this point now, and their futures are hinging on each other. The support here for Brian Schottenheimer originated from Dak Prescott, and he gets his wish, and it's going to be a big telling part of how his career goes for the next 4 years. And if this is the last contract he has with the Dallas Cowboys, he's putting a lot on the line for Brian Schottenheimer.
So you gave us some great insight, letting us know it'll be a 4-year deal for Brian Schottenheimer. I got to ask for some more insight. Do you know maybe or speculation what maybe was the leading factor that made them make the decision today is going to be the day that we make Brian Schottenheimer a made man?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a decision that led to today. It was just finally, them coming together and realizing that, hey, this is kind of working up against a tight schedule now, because if they let this go through the weekend, this team is prepared to go to Mobile next week for the Senior Bowl. They would leave on Tuesday. They would need time to announce the hire and do a press conference and all of that. So talk about getting it done at the 11th hour. They certainly did. And now they get to go to Mobile next week and, feel the coaching staff. Jerry Jones said on y'all's airwaves a few weeks ago during the season that there's going to be over 500 coaches looking for jobs at the Senior Bowl next week. So that's you can imagine that's going to be a big part of what they're trying to do, as well as scout this talent for the first draft class under Brian Schottenheimer.
You mentioned press conference. The press conference, for those who don't know, will be at 11 a.m. at the Star on Monday morning, and you can hear it right here on your home of the Cowboys 105.3 The Fan. We're talking to Nick Harris of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, beat writer with the Dallas Cowboys. And Nick, you're talking about these assistant coaches at the Senior Bowl. I don't know if you've heard anything yet officially, but is Jason Witten going to be a part of this staff? And if it's if it's Brian Schottenheimer, are there good odds that he could be?
Yeah, that's certainly something we are tracking at the moment with Jason Witten. There are people in the building that are expecting him to be on staff.
Okay.
And there's other people in the building that are like, I would tap your brakes on that. So I think there's going to be some decision in the hands of Jason Witten. We know that there's a lot of support for Jason Witten, not only from people in the building, but all the way up top with the Joneses. And I think if Jason Witten came to Jerry Jones and was like, hey, I want to be on staff, I'd be shocked if Jerry Jones said, no, we don't want that. This is something that I think would require mutual interest. The interest from the Cowboys is certainly there.
Put it like this. His pictures on the hallway wall with the helmet off. Remember that play? I was at that game when he was running down the field and his helmet came off and he still kept running. I mean, that picture is in the Cowboys Star right outside the locker room.
Yep, certainly. He's highly respected in that building. I mean, you could talk to guys like Jake Ferguson, who didn't even play with Witten, and he has so much respect for the game he has given him just in his time in Dallas. It would definitely be a welcomed addition, but it would take mutual interest from both sides.
If you had to deduce, Mr. Nick Harris, and I hate to put you on the spot right here, or maybe you don't mind it, do you think this was a Jerry or a Steven call, or maybe a culmination where you think they saw eye to eye and bringing in Brian Schottenheimer to be the new head coach?
This is something that spurred off of player support for Schottenheimer, and specifically with Dak Prescott. And that allowed him to get to the interview table. And once he got to the interview table, impressed Jerry, it was just a certain point to where Jerry wanted to think, and Jerry thought for a little over 48 hours, and here we are. If maybe it was in Steven's hands, maybe it does get done a little bit sooner. I don't think that's an indictment on anything or anything like that. I think Jerry just took a little bit longer, wanted to mull over all the options, evaluate what was in front of them, and they went ahead and hired Schottenheimer today.
We know the positives are you got some continuity. The players want to play for this guy, including the quarterback who, Dak Prescott. He doesn't have to go through another offensive coordinator or learn a new system. He's got some consistency right there. But if you were to check your list of negatives, what are some of the downsides to hiring Brian Schottenheimer?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, he's a first-time head coach. There would be a lot riding on, early on, there's going to be a big microscope on what he's doing. And every single thing is going to be criticized because he is the Dallas Cowboys head coach. And even more, he's a Dallas Cowboys head coach who doesn't have a lot of fan support going in. It's going to take, a strong first impression. But I think first off, it starts with building this culture the way Brian Schottenheimer wants to build it. And I think there's a lot of positives he can draw away from the Mike McCarthy era and being able to kind of carry some of that over, but also make it his own. I think that'll certainly be one of the bigger tasks in front of him. But if you're talking offensively, you look at the past, his past as a play caller, there hasn't been a whole lot to draw from other than a couple of years when he was in Seattle, where he had a strong offensive output. Now, granted, he has been able to be under this offense with Mike McCarthy. He's helped construct it to a certain extent, but now he gets to fully construct it around what him and Dak envision it to be. He's going to have full control, full autonomy at this point. There has been so much support over the course of the last decade. You could go back about 10 years ago. He was a hot coordinator name. To make this guy a head coach, some feel like he would be a better head coach than a coordinator just because of that culture building repertoire that he has. How will that translate onto the field, though? This microscope is going to be really big on Brian Schottenheimer. Knowing his personality, knowing the family and pedigree he comes from, he'll be completely fine with the microscope. But you have to wonder what that leash looks like at the same time.
By the way, you mentioned his stint with Seattle. I want to make it clear for several Tolos were asking yesterday, wondering about, was he the guy calling the plays when they're in the Super Bowl and didn't give the ball to beast mode and he had Russell Wilson try to throw? No, that was not him. That was offensive coordinator Darrell Bevel, who kept the Seattle Seahawks from winning their second Super Bowl in a row, and Dan Quinn getting the ring there. And yeah, all you had to do was hand it to beast mode. He was not there at that time, but he is 51 years old. He's been around the block several times. He's a legacy kid. The other thing, I'm trying to remember this correctly. Didn't he get hired by Mike McCarthy to come here?
Now, he was a consultant from McCarthy's staff in 2022.
Yeah.
Hired by the offensive staff to come on.
In other words, McCarthy recommended him. Now, in other words, it wasn't like he was a Jerry or a Stephen hire that McCarthy had to inherit. Correct.
He had a strong relationship with Brian going all the way back to Mike McCarthy's days coaching under Marty Schottenheimer.
Mm-hmm.
There was a story that Mike told last year about how he used to watch Brian when he was a kid. So I mean, their relationship does go back a little bit. But yeah, that was a McCarthy hire, and now Brian gets to take over for a guy who stood on the table for him back in 2022.
You're listening to Nick Harris, Fort Worth Star-Telegram, Dallas Cowboys beat writer. Nick, when you look at some of the staff members that have already left, the likes of a John Fossil, Al Harris, what kind of identity do you think Brian Schottenheimer is going to try to build in Dallas, whether that be the type of coordinators he brings in, what he does in free agency? How much autonomy do you think he's going to have? I know it's early, but just how much different is this Dallas Cowboys team going to look under Brian Schottenheimer?
Yeah, and those are the questions we have right now, Blake. I'd be lying to you if I had any answers for those. I think that's probably the biggest thing we're going to be looking for out of the presser is what does a Brian Schottenheimer team look like? Is he going to be emphasizing, toughness? I feel like, there were times in games last year, you can look back to the Detroit game, you can look back to, the second or both of the Philly games and see that the team was just not physical enough at times, especially in the trenches. How is that going to be an emphasis for Brian Schottenheimer? Is it going to be an emphasis on running the football a little bit more just because that's, a little bit of what he's had in the past? Or is it going to be maximizing the connection between Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb? I think one thing working in the favor of Schottenheimer is he's got options and the fact that, he can kind of build this identity in a variety of different ways, or he can kind of make it a Swiss Army knife of his own. I think there's an open canvas in front of Brian Schottenheimer. There's going to be front office influence. I think that would be I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. But Brian Schottenheimer is going to have enough control to where you can look and say comfortably at the end of the day that this is his team. But he is going to have help in building this staff from the front office.
You're up there at the Star every day, the beat writers are. What is his relationship with the media? In other words, Is he somebody that's very approachable? I'm just asking because people are wondering, are the media going to rip him to shreds? Is he having a relationship? Is he too quiet? Is he a leader of men? People want to know those things because they don't know anything about him other than his name, and he's 51 years old.
Yeah, he's got a great relationship with the media. He's really good with us in press conferences, those Monday availabilities that the coordinators have during the season. He's really open in those. And, even outside after the pressers, he's willing to dive in a little bit deeper too. He'll put you onto some knowledge, man. If you're a fan of ball, just go back and listen to a few of those press conferences that he had this past season. If you're trying to get an understanding of what maybe a Schottenheimer scheme or system could look like, I think there could probably be some breadcrumbs found in those press conferences just because I think he's a little bit more open than from what I've seen from other coaches around the league. And I think that just comes with experience, not only in his own right, being a coordinator, going back all the way 15 years, but also seeing how his dad, Marty, did it, seeing how his uncle, Kurt, did it, who was a DC in the league for a brief period of time in the late 90s and 2000s. He knows how to do this job, and part of knowing how to do the job is the media. And I expect him for that to continue as the head coach.
That means he's going to have a great time with Sean and RJ on Friday mornings. By the way, real quick here, Troy Aikman on his radio show was saying he really likes Brian Schottenheimer. He says, I don't know if he's the right guy, the perfect fit for this particular job or not. He said, I don't have a say-so on that, but because you have to be a unique kind of guy to work with this front office and Jerry and Steven. But he did say the guy's very smart, just like you said. He knows his stuff, and he says he likes him a lot.
Yeah, and I think that support is certainly helpful in Schottenheimer's case. And he had a lot of outside support kind of pour in throughout the week, too, from different media channels, Troy Aikman certainly being one. And I think the support that, some of his former staffers have had as well really benefited him in this case, too. But I think at the end of the day, the player support from Dak Prescott, namely, is eventually what got the ball rolling in this. And then his strong interview is what ended up finishing.
Nick, I want to pivot just a little bit to the left, a little 25 degrees. A big name that was in this head coaching search was Kellen Moore. Any idea, speculation on why that didn't go through and kind of how those interviews went and not pursuing him any further?
Yeah, it was a situation where they didn't speak with Moore super extensively because they knew a lot about Moore. And there was a evaluation of Moore almost every day whenever he was an offensive coordinator in Dallas. And Moore was, to simply put it, he was preparing for a playoff game last week. So it wasn't like they had necessarily the time. I think it came to a situation where they knew Moore and they had a lot of people in the building that knew Moore. And as they walked around and got opinions of people that, that they highly respect and that they factor in this decision process, there was a desire to give Shotty a chance, and they gave him that chance. And he ended up winning with it, and that's where we are.
And last one for me here, was there any other candidates that were close, or was it just Shotty and Kellen Moore? Was there any ones maybe we were hearing that you're like, it was between this guy and that guy down to the end, or maybe a name we hadn't even heard that kind of jumped in it late that you heard about?
Yeah, I think initially there was an interest in Deion Sanders from Jerry Jones. I don't think it ever got to a point to where they even talked any sort of specifics. I think it was simply a phone conversation there at the very beginning. And it was just kind of a fun idea to track all the way through. And especially if we had gotten through the weekend and Deion was prepared to be in DFW next week, it could have been, something we talked about a little bit more. I never really considered Deion a top candidate, but I thought it was always interesting his name being thrown out as the first one the day that McCarthy, split ways with the team. But I think if I had to pick a guy that did finish second, it was Kellen Moore. It was a situation where they knew Kellen Moore. They have high respect for Kellen Moore. I don't think that has changed. It just came to a situation where they prefer Shotty and they preferred that sort of consistency going into 2025 a little bit more. I think this was very situational. Had this been this time last year, who knows? This could have been a much different conclusion. This probably could have been Moore getting this job instead. But here we are in 2025, a lot more context with Brian Schottenheimer as the offensive coordinator, a lot more context in his relationship with Dak Prescott, and now that leads to him being head coach.
Nick Harris, Fort Worth Star-Telegram. It's always a pleasure having you on. Any parting words with this Schottenheimer news you want to let the fans know before you get out of here?
Oh man, I'm getting ready to sleep, guys. This is going to be one hell of a nap, let me tell you.
Well, we appreciate you taking time to speak with us. Let the fans know where they can go and see your work, as you do a great job with the Star Telegram.
Hey, Blake CA, I really appreciate you guys. You can give me a follow on Twitter at Nick Harris FWST, or give us a read on star-telegram.com. We're pumping out content as we speak.